Okay, okay. Welcome back. Welcome back to ISO with Joy. I'm a few minutes late. I feel like it's a 4 minute thing with me, so I'm not entirely sure why. But, anyways, hey there, makers, crafters, and beginner sewers. Welcome back to So What? This is a podcast where I hold your hands through your beginner sewing journey. And today I want to talk about learning to sew. The craft store makers. As a craft store person or someone who goes to the craft store, you may feel that you need all of these different things. But today, I want you to feel like you don't need to spend upwards of $300 on gadgets or different things that really are not going to make a difference in your sewing journey. So, I'll be sorting through 10 popular sewing tools live in this and in, Okay. I'm going to be sorting through 10 popular tools and which ones are game changers and which ones are gimmicks. And I will show you each of them in hopes that this will help you on your beginner sewing journey. I'm just going to adjust this a little bit. And in hopes that you're not going to go out there and spend money that you really don't need to spend. So hopefully this is a helpful thing for you. So without further ado, I'm going to start with the life changers and the total gimmicks. So let's start with a life changer. These are cutting tools. These are the things that you would absolutely need on day one when you start your sewing journey. So the first thing I want to talk about are fabric shears. This is what they look like. I'm going to show you up close. This is a pair of Geiger scissors. I've had these now for going on probably 10 years, and they maintain their sharpness, their heavyweight, they're good fabric shears. A good pair of fabric shears will probably cost you about, upwards of $20, $30. These are not the ones you see at a dollar store or you see at an office max or Staples. These are specifically designed for cutting fabric, and they do it very well, especially along the grain. If you've been sewing for a while, you'll hear people say sew along the grain or sew outside of the grain. But in any case, you need a good pair of fabric shears. So this is absolutely one that you want to get. This is a game changer. Having a good pair of fabric shears will save you so much stress over time, and it lasts. So when you get a good pair, you can use it for years and years to come. In addition, you can sharpen them when they start to feel dull. But this one, honestly, in almost 10 years, I have not had to sharpen it. So I will definitely, it's one that I absolutely recommend if you're looking for a pair of shears. Now, of course, I give the one side. I'm going to give you the other side, the gimmick. This is a gimmick here, and let me show you what it is. These are Pinkin shears. I love them. I love my Pinkin shears. I use them for projects, but honestly, as a beginner sewist, you're not going to need a pair of Pinkin shears. Most people don't need them on day one. Pinkin shears are more of one of those things that you will consider like a like to have, but not a must have in the sewing world. You use them for different things. Now, they're primarily used to avoid fraying around your fabric pieces. So if let's say you're cutting something and it's a fabric piece that frays a lot, and you don't have a serger. Pink and Shears will help with that, but honestly, I wouldn't put a lot of money or a lot of stock in it. Now, get a good pair of Pink and Shears if and when you do have some of those, the income you have or whatever you want to spend it on the good pair, you can go ahead and get a good pair. But to start, that is absolutely not one of the things that I would say go out and buy as a beginner sewist. It's good to have, it's a nice to have, but it's not a must have. So in that case, I put it in the gimmick category. Okay, so next, let's talk about the setup. Let's talk about other things that you will use as a beginner sewist. So when I first started sewing, the first few words that my aunt, bless her soul, would always say is measure twice, cut once. And when I that was way back when, so I'm starting to date myself a little bit here. But when I say measure twice, cut once, at the time, most of the people who were sewing were using measuring tapes to measure. So most people probably have a measuring tape just like this, okay? And there's absolutely nothing wrong with these. They're good to have, they're nice to have. I think a lot more people should have them. Actually, I think most people should have them. But are these absolutely necessary? Let me explain. These I would consider at this point a gimmick as a beginner sewist. Hear me out. Don't come for me. Let me explain why these are a gimmick, okay? Unless you're someone like a seamstress or a tailor, someone who actually measures people and needs the ability to go through contours and the shapes of people, You don't need this. Most things have patterns, and the patterns call for, like a half an inch and things like that. If you're a beginner sewist, you need something consistent because you're not yet used to the movements and the different things around shapes, around curves, around corners. So this is not going to help you as much as I think every sewist should have one of these. It is not necessarily the thing that's going to save your sewing journey. So if you don't have to spend money on this right away, I say you put it in the gimmick basket and then come back to it another time. Now, in reverse for that, what do you need? You need a good pair of acrylic, a good acrylic ruler. So I have this long one here, and it's approximately 3 inches by 18 inches. I'm sorry, 3 by 18. And I love this. This is a pop socket. I just put it there. You don't have to have one, but I just find that it's easier to work with. Now, why do I have this? First, I would say you want to invest in one that's clear. Why do you need it clear? Because you need to be able to see through to your fabric and see exactly what you're cutting. The other thing too is like most rulers stop at the 12-inch mark. This one goes further and goes through 18. So it gives you a little more leeway and a little more of an opportunity to do more cutting. In addition to that, it also has it has on the wider side 3 inches of measure. So you can measure both ways. If you're cutting squares, let's say you wanted to square a corner for a bag, a tote, or anything like that, this would be a good one to have. You can just measure it and do your 2 by 2 or 3 by 3 corner. So it's a great tool to have. It's an acrylic ruler, and I have this, and I have a few other smaller rulers too, square rulers and different things. But an acrylic ruler actually comes in handier than having this tape here. So this one I would absolutely call it's a game changer. This is a game changer. You need this as a beginner sewist, and this more like a gimmick. You don't necessarily need this, but not at least not to start your journey. Once you become used to doing things and you start making clothing items or you're making clothing items for other people, it's a good one to have. But right now, I would say you can do without it. And then next, let's talk about the tailor's chalk. Now, this one is a little controversial because I've seen people who say, "Oh, you must use a heat. There's the heat erasable pen, or you must use the painter's chalk. This is what the painter's chalk looks like, and this is the heat erasable pen." Now, I feel like if you're starting out, especially if you're trying to save money, this is what you need. For one thing, you get a lot more bang for your buck out of this. You use it, it does leave a good marking on your fabric. It's easy to hold, it's small, and it fits into any corner. You don't need to worry about anything. You use it, and then once you're done, if you still have it on your fabric, you just take a piece of cloth or a piece of fabric scrap and just rub it off, and it comes off. These have been used for years and years, and nobody ever had any problems with them. Now, so I would consider this one a game changer. You absolutely should get this. And the great thing about this one is that when you buy it, you get a lot for your money. So you're not just getting one, you probably get like a white one, a yellow one, a red one, and then the blue one, and you'll get a whole pack for like a dollar or $2, which is absolutely worth it. So this is absolutely a game changer. Now, on the flip side, though, I have seen people who prefer this friction pen. While friction pens are great to have, they also come with they have their advantages and they have their disadvantages. The one advantage I would say it has is that it does leave clear markings. So yes, you will be able to see very well what you currently have just marked. The not so great thing about this, though, is that it leaves a mark. So these require heat to get rid of the marking. Now, what I have experienced, and I try to be very careful when I use this because I try to use it on the inside of the fabric when I know it's not going to be on the outside. Why? Because the fact that you need heat to erase it means that when it gets colder, it can reappear. So while it's a great tool to have, it's not a must have. And it's one of those things that I will say, hey, you know what? You got it. You use it. If you don't have it, there's no need to use it. In addition to the fact that this one does have to be refilled every ever so often. Granted, when you buy it, it comes with a lot of refills in the pack, which is great. I have a lot of refills. So it's not that expensive. But if you're really looking for things as a beginner sewist and something that you can start off with, I do recommend that you go with the painter's chalk as opposed to the friction pen or the heat erasable pen. So now let's talk about another thing which I consider a gimmick. Okay, these are the snips that you see everyone using. I'm not gonna lie, when I first started sewing, I loved hearing the sound of, like you can hear it right there. It's really cute, it's really cool, but you don't need it. When you sew a lot, for one thing, your sewing machine probably comes with its own snips. Okay, so when I bought my sewing machine, it was brand new, came with its own snips, so I didn't need to go out and buy something else. But if you are someone who's just starting out, you really don't need this. Your pair of scissors will do a great job. The snips that comes with your sewing machine will do a great job. And also, you'll find that you don't. I mean, you're not going to have a lot of opportunities to keep cutting things. So when you first start sewing, what I find is that people, are primarily sewing in straight lines, and then they get to a curve or an end, and then they go around it. For things like that, you don't absolutely need to have snips. If you're doing something that requires like, multiple stitches, multiple layers of stitches, let's say you're doing gathers or shearing, whatever that it requires, you do one row, you do another row, you do another row. Okay, so that probably does require using the shears. But again, as a beginner sewist, it's a gimmick. You don't absolutely need to buy it. So you're going to save yourself some money by not spending extra money on things you really don't need. Sewing should be fun. Sewing should be practical, and sewing is actually meant to be, it should be relaxed, and it should actually be producing something. You should have an outcome, not an output from your sewing journey, not just spending money and not getting anything in return. So this one here, I consider a gimmick. You don't need it. If you have a pair that came with your sewing machine, that's wonderful, but you absolutely don't have to have it. The other thing I've seen people get are these Exacto pens. Now, this one is one of those weird, controversial ones that I'm just like, why would anyone get an Exacto pen? Now, I understand if you are someone who uses a lot of patterns and you need to cut through your patterns or different things, but it's an absolute gimmick. You don't need an Exacto pen. It's a nice to have, but it's not a must have. And I'll be honest and say, in my entire years of sewing, I find myself using this more when I am using my embroidery machine. If I am cutting through things and I need to be very close, and I don't want to use my embroidery scissors, this is a good one to have. But this is more an a knife is more for embroidery or crafts. If you're doing craft work, if you're making cards, that's what this is for. It is a gimmick. It is not a game changer when it comes to your sewing journey. So while I think it's great to have, I don't think it's one that you need for your sewing journey. So if you're a beginner on this, I will say hold off on getting that until you're ready to have. Now, on the flip side, though, another thing that I think is a game changer is this. This is called a budkin. And basically it is, if you were doing something with elastic and you needed to thread your elastic or rope through it, you just clamp it on there using this, and I'll show you what it is. You clamp it on there, slide this little disc down, and it will hold as you thread it through your pipe, the piping on your bag or your elastic for a skirt or something like that. Budkins, I mean, I have a hair bonnet and shower cap business, so this thing gets used a lot. But even if I didn't have that, it would still get used, because if I was doing a drawstring bag, if I was doing a small bag, or anything that requires the use of elastic or rope or thread or anything like that that loops through multiple things, a budkin is definitely one of those things that I will say it's a must have. So it is absolutely a game changer when it comes to your beginner sewing journey. So if you're looking for something that would be helpful to you, I think this one is one that you would actually get a lot more value from. So let's talk about another gimmick that I've seen, and I really just think that people need to stop with this one. It is this seam guide right here. Okay, so I'm going to show you what that looks like. It's a magnetic seam guide. You put it on your machine, and then you keep things through. While this is good to have, I feel like it's also deceptive because it doesn't actually teach the person who's learning how to stay within, sew a straight line. So what I find is that you run the risk of having this and then just curving. If your fabric comes a little bit up, it doesn't really save you or anything. Like, it doesn't really keep the measurements on. So instead of using something like this, I actually more recommend you pay a little more attention to your presser foot and the edge of your presser foot and how it relates to the little measuring guide that's usually or the measuring gauge that's on the plate of your sewing machine. While this is a good to have, I feel like it gives you a false sense of comfort or a false sense of security that you're sewing a straight line. It's nice to have, but I would consider it more gimmick. Now, I do have it because sometimes some students feel more comfortable with this. So I will show them, when I'm teaching a class virtually, I would show them this, but it's not a must have. So I tend to sway people away from it. I feel more comfortable if you are learning how to sew a straight line on your own versus having to use this seam guide. So good to have, not a must have, absolutely a gimmick. The other thing that's a gimmick are these seam gauges. Okay, you've probably seen these many times. You see it in multiple videos and things like that. Um, I like my seam gauge, and I will tell you when I use it. The only time I use it is when I need to adjust the hem on either a pair of pants or I need to, like a shirt or something. This comes in handy because it allows you the flexibility to see things from a leveled point of view, and then you just move this up and down and all of that. Nice to have. How often do I hem pants or a shirt or a skirt and things like that? Not very often. So while it's a good and handy tool to have, it's not a must have. So I wouldn't say go out if you're starting your sewing journey, go out and get one of these. It's okay, it works, it's great, but do I need it? No, you don't need it. If during your along your sewing journey you start to see that you're doing more things that requires adjustments, this would be a good tool to have, and I would say yes, you can absolutely use it. So this also goes into the gimmick pack. So as you can see here, I have a lot of things that I fell prey to the I absolutely have to get this, and it's not a must have. These are like to have and not absolute must haves. So if you have any questions as I'm, going through these tools, please feel free to let me know. So for those just joining me, I'm talking about gimmicks versus, life changers when it comes to sewing tools. So if there's something you would like, you have questions about why do you use this versus that, this is a good opportunity to ask that question. Why do you use one versus the other? Now I have this tool here, which is a chalk wheel, or seam reel, a wheel or whatever. I like it. Will I recommend anybody get it? No. The only reason I got it is because it's part of a package of something else I had, and it was nice to have, not a must have. So you basically just roll things to get the lines or to get the crease and things like that that you want to measure out or things like that. Absolutely not needed. 1000% gimmick. This is one of those things that even when I first saw it, I was like, why is that in there? It's not a need. But, people sometimes like to feel like, having something in your hands makes you feel a little more professional, which I totally get, but it's not, it's a like to have, not a must have. So I've gone through all of these and I've gone through them relatively quickly, but I also want to hear from you. If there are things that you have questions about, let me know. I would be more than happy to share or as share my experience with you on things that have worked for me and things that have not worked for me. Um, I enjoy sewing. I think sewing is a great skill to have, especially right now where skills are varied. People are changing or pivoting. They say AI is going to take everything, but I guarantee you AI is not going to take away sewing. Why do I say that? You can program a machine to do a lot of things. I have my embroidery machine. Basically, it's a programmable one. You take it and put it in there. But guess what? Someone does have to take it in. Someone does have to put it in there. Someone does have to measure things out. Someone has to do all of that stuff. And I just don't see that going away anytime soon. And the skill set will always be valuable no matter what happens. If you remember during the pandemic, where a lot of people were in need of masks before we knew that you needed an N95 mask to wear. Sewing was needed at that point. And I know I remember I sold quite a few, like a lot of face masks because that was helpful and that was the one thing that people could guarantee or rely on at the time. Sewing came in handy. So if you're someone who's still on the fence and you're not entirely sure, do I want to do it? Do I not want to do it? I say go for it because sewing is one of those skills that once you gain it and once you have it, you're going to be able to use it over and over and over again. Um, So I'm going to tell you a little bit about my sewing journey. I started sewing when I was about 8, 7, 8, that age range. My aunt was the one who introduced me to sewing. She primarily introduced me to hand sewing, and she's since passed because she was much older at the time. I didn't actually start machine sewing until much later. I think I was in my 30s when I started machine sewing, and yes, I was in my 30s. But between that and when I was younger, I did a lot more crocheting, hand crochet, knitting, hand sewing, and I did a lot of those types of things, and I enjoyed it. But when I eventually started machine sewing, I absolutely fell in love with it. So if AI was going to do something, I think it's more like you will have more artificial intelligence type machines, right? Machines to do a little more with a little less stress on the person who's doing it, or maybe self cleaning, a self reneedling, or rethreading the machine or something like that. But I just don't see the skill sets for sewing going away anytime soon. So if you're on the fence, pick it up. Let me know. I have a lot of sewing tips and tricks on my page, and I also share a lot of sewing projects. If you go on my page, I sew with joy.com, you will see where I have shared easy things that are helpful for beginner sewists who are just not sure, or they want to start something new. Um, this is an opportunity to do that. So let's see. So I'm just going to do a quick run through of the items, gimmick versus game changer, so that it sticks. And if you have any other questions or things you want me to address at next week's podcast, please be sure to let me know, or next week's live. I do have a separate podcast that I'm going to be doing later on today. So anyway, so we'll start with the first one, which is absolute game changer, a pair of very good shears. You need them. These are Gangers, and the Ganger scissors, and I've had them forever, and they work. They're good, weighty pair, so get them if you're looking for something. Or Guggenheim, those are also a very good one. They come with forged steel. I don't know what forged steel is, but that's what I'm told that they are made of. So get a good pair of scissors, is what I'm saying. A gimmick are Pink and shears. They're good. They're fun, but you don't absolutely need them as in your beginner sewing journey. Um, Other thing is this game changer, Taylor's chalk. Absolutely need them. They're great to have. You get a lot more bang for your buck. These friction pens or heat erasable pens, these are gimmick. You don't need them. They're good to have. They're not a must-have, especially when you're starting out on your beginner sewing journey. I want you to be able to save money and not be spending on things you absolutely do not need. So gimmick, tape, measuring tape, and I explained earlier why I think these are just not. They're not it. They're not it. If you're starting out on your sewing journey, you're not going to make use of this much. So unless you're already experienced, it's not going to help you. But if you're looking for something that will get you through as you start your sewing journey, these acrylic rulers are great. This is a 3 by 18, and it does exactly what you need it to do. It's going to help you with not just the measurements. It has a quarter, half, 3/4, and a full inch markers, so you can use that. It's acrylic, see through, so you can see your fabric even as you start to mark where you want to cut. So I absolutely consider this one a game changer and not a gimmick. Another one consider a gimmick are these X-Acto knives. Not needed unless you're doing a lot of embroidery. If you're a beginner to embroidery, this might come in handy if you don't want to spend the money on a pair of embroidery scissors, because those can start to add up when you start your embroidery journey. But this is not needed as a beginner sewist. The other thing is the seam gauges or seam guide. They're great to have if you're doing a lot of alterations. So if you alter clothes a lot, it's a good one to have because it helps you with the measurements and trying to stay consistent across the board. Do you absolutely need it? No. So I consider this one a gimmick. And another one, which I also consider a gimmick, are these snips, thread snips. They're good. Some come with your sewing machine package. If you have a brand new sewing machine, it's good to have. But do you absolutely need it? I don't think so. So it's also another thing I would consider a gimmick. One thing I do think is an absolute game changer? These here. This is a budkin, and this is what it looks like. Do you need it? Yes, absolutely. As a beginner sewist, you absolutely will need a budkin. So if you're doing any kind of bags, anything that requires pulling fabric through a small narrow area, pulling elastic through a small narrow area, anything that requires that, this budkin comes in handy. I make shower caps and shower bonnets, and I use these just about every day. So if you think you're going to be doing any kind of sewing, I do think a good bodkin is going to be helpful. Now they have the longer ones, and it's plastic, which also comes in handy. Do you need it to start? No, I don't think you absolutely need that one to start. It's a good to have, a like nice to have, not a must have. So while this is a game changer, I would say the other ones are more what I would consider a gimmick at this point. Another one that's a gimmick is the seam guide. So this is what it looks like. It has a magnet, and you slap it on there to be able to measure out where you're as you sew it, whether or not you can sew a straight line and things like that. I like having it. Does it work for beginner sewists? No, I don't think a seam guide is needed for a beginner sewist. Why? Because when you're first starting out, you want to get comfortable with seeing how your presser foot aligns to the gauges that's already on your machine. You want to see how everything works together. So if you are relying on a seam guide as opposed to seeing how to measure, how to work your machine on a straight line, I think you're going to do yourself a long-term disservice, because at some point you got to take the training wheels off. So while a seam guide might be a one-time thing, I use this one for demonstration when I'm teaching virtually. I don't necessarily think this is something you need to have as a beginner sewist. It's just more like to have, so I would consider this a gimmick. And the last one is this rolling wheel, a wheel here, which I think, you know what, it's nice to have. Is it a must have? No. And honestly, I did not buy this separately. It just happened to come with another package of things that I already had. And I said, hey, you know what? Why is this even there? But I still went with it anyway. So I wanted to share it with you. It's not a must have, it's just considered a gimmick. So I say all this to say, if you're new to sewing, if you're learning to sew, sewing is a wonderful thing. It's great to learn. It's great. It's relaxing for me. And it's something that I can see myself doing for a long time to come. But do I think you need to go out and spend $300 on your first sewing journey? Absolutely not. So I would say go with the items that are considered, must haves, or the items that I consider game changers. And the items that are gimmicks, if you have some income that you just want to spend money on something else, you can get them. But as a beginner soloist, you are not going to need them. So don't waste your money on things that are not needed. Instead of that, you probably want to spend your money on a good set of fabrics that you're going to work with. Now, again, if you watched my live last week, I talked about not going out and spending money on, expensive fabrics. So before you even start buying fabrics, if you're new to sewing, I recommend going to Goodwill. I recommend, walking around your home and looking for clothing items that you probably don't wear anymore. Cotton is the preferred option. I would say go with cotton. Don't go out and start buying, different things, or starting out with satin or silk. Those are a little trickier to work with. But if you have cotton, if you have a bed sheet, pillowcase, and things like that, you can start off with those. Start off with cutting, like just working around them using some of these items that I've just shared. And then you just go from there, start your journey that way. Don't spend a lot of money. Spend your money on the essential thing: a good pair of scissors, a budkin, because you probably need it, an acrylic ruler, because you'll probably need it for measuring, painter's chalk, saying painter's tailor's chalk, because you will need that, good pins or clips. Those, I didn't include that here because it's almost like a given, but if pins or clips are good things that you will need. You don't need both. Just decide on which one you want to go with. As a matter of fact, like for newer students, I recommend pins. I know. Pins I don't recommend for little ones who are just starting out, but if you're an older person, I do think pins are better because it allows you to be a little more flexible. Clips can sometimes get bulky and stay in the way. So while I recommend those for younger kids, I don't necessarily think that they are beginner friendly if you're just starting out. But anyway, so I wanted to share these with you because it's what, I saw a TikTok the other day, and I saw someone who was spending a lot of time and saying, sharing my newest acquisition. And I'm like, oh, that's great. But your newest acquisition is not necessarily something that a beginner sewist will want or start off with. So I wanted to do this and share with you the most important things you need to have as you start your sewing journey. If you have any other questions, please be sure to leave them in the comments. So if you're watching this later on, I hope that you found this helpful, and be sure to click on the next video so you can find more helpful tips and tricks. Have a wonderful day.